All right, everyone, it's Naomi Wolf, and I'm here live with Chris Prosch of Felix Strategies. You met him, may have met him again yesterday, but met him for the first time on my show. And Chris Prosch is a founder and CEO of Felix Strategies, as I mentioned, but he was also an intern at the UN. Then he helped to run or ran congressional and Senate campaigns. He knows how the political sausage is made inside and out, and he now runs a company that helps us at Daily Clout and other independent voices be successful and reach millions of people as legacy media is crumbling. So welcome back, Chris Prosch.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Well, we're talking about the debate last night. I'm still kind of in shock. Let's start with you. You wade right in. What was that? What did we see?
First off, I was extremely shocked with the professionalism that CNN demonstrated. Actually, I did some note taking last night, obviously on another show, and I think they muted or cut Trump off, I think once or twice during the entire debate, and I think they cut Biden off close to 9-10 times. So I was actually surprised by that. But yeah, no, I was very impressed with the level of professionalism that they actually demonstrated, and it wasn't a knockout punch, Trump just decimating Biden by any means, but I am reeling from Twitter sphere exploding right now with Newsweek and Wall Street Journal and ABC and CNN and the Atlantic even basically calling for changing the guards. So
yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's interesting. They were quite neutral, right, and quite professional. And I do wonder whether that outburst from the Trump spokeswoman a day or two previously saying you guys are biased led them to kind of think, well, it's more important for us to have some long-term credibility than to get our guy portrayed in a good light. So, that's I wonder if that was a factor. Do you think that was a factor? Or do you think it was just like they know they're under scrutiny, legacy media is dying, and they just have to, be a little more professional?
yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't think legacy media or mainstream media, as I would call it, I don't think it's dying necessarily. I think they've severely taken a beating these past 5 years, rightfully so. And self-inflicted, obviously. The credibility has plummeted. But I think they'll always be around in some fashion. I think the government obviously will prop them up, here and there. But no, yeah. I mean, I think honestly, last night was them finally, capitulating to the idea that people are exhausted from their bias.
Yeah.
And there was numerous times, I mean, I think Trump exaggerated a lot of things last night. Biden flat out lied numerous times, with the Border Patrol Union, where the Border Patrol Union president got on Twitter immediately and said, "We have never endorsed him. We will not endorse him ever. He's a liar." Or the Charlottesville hoax that the mainstream media finally admitted, I think 2-3 days ago that was a complete lie. And Biden doubled down on that.
Let me just jump in there. Say more about the Charlottesville hoax for people who, don't follow conservative or independent media. I mean, I also don't exactly know what that is.
Yeah. So about 7 years ago, when President Trump was in the White House, obviously there was a situation in North Carolina where there was basically a big protest that turned a little violent with an African American church and then white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And President Trump got on national TV and talked about it, and then the media basically lied about it and said that he called them very fine people. And basically that turned into a big spin about how Trump's a racist, Trump's a neo-Nazi, all that.
And had he not called them very fine people?
No. What he said was, and you can, and the videos are online. You can see the whole thing. You can clearly see they edited it out. But basically, what he said was, aside from the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, who I completely denigrate 100%. There are very fine people and good people that. Yeah. So, but they edited that part out.
That's so awful.
Yeah.
Well, interesting. Okay, so they were. Well, let me ask you this before we agree that CNN behaved professionally. My husband pointed out, he was timing it, that Trump was given 45-second bites in which to answer, and Biden was given 90-second bites. Did this accord with what you noticed at all? Did you think that there was even-handedness in the time that each candidate was given in which to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I think your husband's right. Obviously, I did notice that Biden got a little extra time here and there, but I think the difference is negligible. Considering, I mean, I could very easily see them basically saying, "Oh well, we'll give him more time, but we'll also mute him more too." If you know what I mean. So it
Interesting.
kind of demonstrate that unbiased that they tried, and I think they succeeded in doing so. But yeah.
One of the scariest things I experienced in the hours leading up to the debate was hearing spokespeople for CNN explain to the American public as if we are tiny children. There's going to be a mute button, and the mute button, when it's on, when the green light is on, will make it difficult for the other person to be heard. To me, that was just such a Stalinist introduction, or like soft launch of the idea that the media is the censor now for our presidential debates. What are your thoughts about that? And by the way, we've got almost 3,000 people joining us live, and it's going fast. So obviously people are going to hear some dissection of this rather traumatic experience we all have.
Yeah, I mean, that's where, like I said yesterday, I think it's very shocking to me that the RNC and Trump, or whomever, DeSantis, whomever you support now or in the future, I think if they were intelligent, they should say, okay, CNN, we'll let you do whatever you want with the first presidential debate, but the second, presidential debate has to be, a Bongino, it has to be Tucker Carlson, to have that level of unbiased. But the problem is, now the second debate will be September 10th with ABC News, and will they demonstrate the same level of brief credibility that CNN demonstrated last night? So, but yeah, I think you're right though. I mean, CNN beforehand laying out all these, and it wasn't even rules. It was like, this is what's going to happen.
What's going to happen, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And like, as someone who's spoken to the media, my entire career, I'm just like reflecting and putting a stake in the ground that the news media is not supposed to tell the subject that
Exactly.
They will censor them. That's just never supposed to happen in a free society. It doesn't happen, and we should be very resistant. I mean, this is one of those moments where the American people really need to rise up en masse. I would say write to CNN's advertisers and say, do not censor presidential debates or any news, that you are not supposed to be muting someone whom you are interviewing. There are ways, like, obviously, if a subject goes on forever, there are ways that a decent journalist, steps in or redirects or says, we're moving on now. But to actually turn off the mic is a new thing. It's like a, Iman in Iran kind of thing. It's like state media in, the Soviet Union, and it's not supposed to happen in the United States of America. So I'm just putting that out there. The other thing, we talked about this briefly yesterday, Chris, is no audience, no live audience, right? So literally with the technologies that exist today, anything could have happened in there and we wouldn't know.
Yep.
Right? Like anything, like was President Biden really there? Was President Trump really there? Were the moderators really there? We literally don't know. And with no live audience, you don't have eyewitnesses, essentially. You have a completely hostage situation, right? And that's also a very disturbing novel introduction. I just want to remind everyone again, as kind of the, let's not lose our history. Debates historically, whether they're congressional debates, debates about slavery, debates about women's suffrage, they take place, town halls, in front of real living Americans who are supposed to be the audience, right? Unmediated. That's a really important part of our history, and we should not let technologies like TV technology, digital technology, strip us of that ability to be witnesses to our own history. What do you think about that? The absence of the audience?
No, I mean, 100%. I mean, I think the CNN's, as I said last night, Stalinist rules before the debate. Again, no audience. I was told they're going to sit down. I guess they changed that at last minute, which which is good. The fact that they're going to have a 3-minute delay with everything, as opposed to a 30-second delay in the past. And at the very last minute, we also heard that they both campaigns, President Biden, President Trump, can only bring 2 people with them to the stage, and that was literally it. So basically, in this building, you had no audience. You had the 2 candidates, you had the 2 moderators, and then 4 other people for two a piece. So basically, like 10 people roughly in this entire building. Then they have to go outside across the street to another building where all the journalists were at. And what's funny is after the debate,
wait, I'm sorry, the journalists were not even present in the room. They were watching from somewhere else.
Correct.
Shocking. I mean, that's truly shocking.
And well, yeah, and Twitter sphere was blowing up last night because the journalists were like, we now they changed their tune. Now they're like, well, we need to be there, when this is happening live. We need to be, in the room,
Why didn't they say that in advance? I mean, of course they need to be there. What's the point of a journalist? We can all watch TV, right?
Yeah, I know. So I think, so my point being is I think CNN's, approach was very, I think it backfired a little bit, but I think they saved themselves a little bit, again, with their professionalism that we haven't seen CNN that way since probably 2000. So.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I just don't want to be too grateful while giant chunks of, our ability to eyewitness a really important event take place. I just want to remind everyone that presidential candidates used to debate outside, in front of thousands and thousands of people, before there were microphones. And reporters were there live. And again, town hall meetings, conventions. I mean, if you're not physically there, if the people are not physically there, they can't pick up really important things. Like, I would say one of the most important things that emerged last night, if it's real, and the trouble with digital imagery is we can't know for sure until things are verified if something's real. One of the most important takeaways was not in the debate itself. It was apparently Mrs. Biden, or Dr. Jill Biden, leading her husband off the stage, and that painful moment where he appeared to have difficulty navigating these low steps, which indeed looked tricky, but low steps. I mean, he was frozen. He couldn't get down them. It was if we'd been hit by a nuclear attack at that moment, it would have been, lights out for the United States of America. So that's the kind of thing that a live audience and journalists present notice, observe, are able to communicate. Whereas when things are so scripted, with the gatekeepers being CNN, you're literally at the mercy of CNN. And as I said yesterday, there is no way CNN was not communicating with the White House. Right. And we can't know without discovery whether the communications were equal with the White House and with the Trump campaign. But all right, yes, they were surprisingly neutral. So I just want to say, now evaluating the candidates' performances, well, one thing is Brian noticed, and I guess some people on Twitter noticed, that Biden had appeared to have an earpiece and appeared to be speaking to someone that was muted, or he was muted while speaking to someone. Did anyone else notice that, or did you notice that? Is there?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the pundits were wondering about that. I don't think it's been substantiated, but it's definitely something that he has been caught with in the past. But yeah, it's something that should be questioned, because I think that, if we're gonna have rules for debates, that's one thing that should actually never happen.
Yeah, and we've run into this before. George Bush Jr., in his debate with Al Gore, actually, for which I was present at debate prep, was accused of using an earpiece, and they just blew it off. But I don't recall that they denied it, and it was a scandal at that time. I mean, literally, if the only reason you're on the stage as a candidate is to repeat what's happening in your ear, that's not a very good measure of your fitness to run the country. So that is a big deal, and again, that's the kind of thing. If there are people milling around, makeup artists, people miking people up, that can't go unnoticed, right? But in this kind of highly surreal environment, it can. Well, let's talk about what the candidates actually said. I mean, let me just first process. Okay. No, seriously, emotionally, I think the most horrifying thing to me, and I'm trying to be very kind of balanced, but at this point I can't be balanced. Biden's facial expression when he's not actually speaking
Yep.
is so disturbing. And I'm not going to say I had nightmares about it, but there's something just kind of freaky and uncanny and alarming about it. And I'm speaking as a former political consultant who I didn't dress Al Gore in uh, earth tones. That's an RNC urban legend, but I did advise about a lot of things, including message, policy on women's issues,
Yep.
policy on urban accessibility, and also how things look, because as a student of history, symbolism is very important. The way a candidate appears is very important. And I don't mean superficially. I mean that there can be things as distracting as, if a woman candidate has earrings that
Yeah.
swing back and forth when she speaks, people won't be able to focus on her. We talked about the Nixon Kennedy debate, in which everyone present thought Nixon won, but the media decided JFK won, I beg your pardon, because Nixon had a 5 o'clock shadow and sweated under the lights and just
And
didn't.
he broke his leg too before the debate, but yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
Yeah.
history. If you're on the receiving end of like liberal media, I didn't know that. But let's go back to Biden's facial expression. Were you disturbed by it? Why was I so disturbed by it? He just seemed to be like,
Yeah.
I mean, he seemed furious and not thinking, which actually gives the suggestion that there was an earpiece more plausibility, because he didn't look thoughtful or clued in about his surroundings when he wasn't actually speaking.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, Naomi. You're 100% right. I mean, one thing that I picked up on a lot, excuse me, was, and if I may go back just briefly, I for one, I think the whole world, was kind of waiting to see what kind of version of Trump were we going to get, what kind of version of Biden were we going to get, were we going to get Trump acting like Trump like usual, being bombastic and rude, were we going to get Biden, was his week off, in prepping, were we going to get the Biden of 2010, who was very articulate, who was strong, who was decisive? And I think both candidates really shocked, the country. I think Trump was, I would say, at least 50-60% more presidential in how at least for the first half he was.
Yeah, that's really well put.
And I was waiting for Biden to really come back a little bit more feisty. But to his facial expressions, it was very interesting though. There'd be a time where, as an example, like Biden would just like, Trump exaggerated obviously, but Biden would just blatantly lie, about the Border Patrol agent or about Charlottesville or about whatever. And then Trump would correct him, or the media would correct him. And he just had this weird look on his face, like, huh, really? Oh, okay. Like, I mean, it was like lost and confused. It was concerning.
Right. Not laws to, I know I said I wouldn't intersperse questions and comments, but I just can't resist because they're very germane. And so I don't want to exclude the audience, just like CNN excluded the audience. Says very profoundly, it's like seeing a person in a hospice. And that's part of my discomfort last night. Like, this person's so frail, any decent human being wants him home, in bed or in his favorite chair with his dog nearby and his wife, not subjected to this, really tormenting situation in which, oh my gosh, at that moment in which, Chris, that moment in which he said, we've got to beat Medicare, that garbled paragraph, and we're all on the edges of our seats. And then finally he concluded with, let's beat Medicare. There was this excruciating moment afterwards where he looked down, and you could tell that in some deep recess of what had been, a functional mind, he knew he had embarrassed himself in front of millions of people. And that's like, anyone watching this is going to empathize deeply, but also think, this person cannot, I mean, at this current moment, it's not about like electing this person. He's elected, right? Or he's the president, whether he got elected or not. It's incredibly concerning, that someone's so broken and unable to manage himself, his own speech and thought processes, is being trotted out really in a banana republic style as a a puppet almost, right? Like, who's really running America? That's what I want to know, having seen this. This guy's not running America. Is Joe Biden running America, right? Is Hillary Clinton running America? Is Obama running? Like, I don't know who's running America, the chief of staff. Nobody knows. China, nobody knows who's running America, but this poor man is clearly not running the United States of America.
Well, and let's address the age thing too, because I get a little, exhausted for people saying there needs to be an age limit to be president. I first off, I don't tolerate, ageism whatsoever. I think the Biden situation is a very specific outlier situation. I mean, and let's be honest, there's been a lot of senators, a lot of congressmen, a lot of presidents, Eisenhower, Reagan, and so forth, who did a great job later in life. So, we shouldn't just
Churchill quite elderly, by the
Winston
time
Churchill. Winston Churchill, when he got into Winston Churchill served 2 non-consecutive terms, by the way. But when he got into his second term, Winston Churchill was 78 years old. So let's not forget that. So, but yeah.
Yeah, well, the age thing, you're right. It's not about your age, it's about your capacities, which is why generally, as we said yesterday, I don't like needlessly intrusive questions about a candidate, but medical reports are relevant, like mental fitness is relevant. And also like drug use is relevant, right? Because we've seen, I mean, I can't speak for all the candidates, right? I can't speak for either of them, but the energy level, the artificial seeming boost in the energy level of Biden sometimes, and the way he sometimes just drops and loses focus. I want to know what's in his bloodstream, and I think that's a fair question to ask about anyone. One thing I want to say about that moment in which Biden garbled a whole paragraph and then decided that we needed to beat Medicare is, to his credit, that would have been a very easy opening for Trump to commit a cheap shot. And one of the things that alienates people like me and my mom, people on the left or independents, is his temptation to go in for that cheap personal shot. It's not presidential, and it's really not necessary. If you're doing well, it's certainly not necessary. And honestly, it may score a point, but it really just makes the debater look bad, in my view, and childish. So I thought he did kind of do a little snarky thing after that, but it was restrained for him. What's your thought about that?
Yeah, I think both of them, got their shots in, obviously. I mean, I think the whole golf moment was a little cringeworthy, to say the least, but I'm glad it ended pretty quickly, but no, yeah, I mean, both of them got their shots in pretty heavily. I mean, Trump, blasted Biden for inflation constantly, and for illegal immigration constantly, and for let's be honest, the young women that have, and it's not one or two, it's hundreds that have been affected over the past, 3 or 4 years, who've been sexually assaulted, murdered, and Biden doesn't want to answer those questions. Same thing with inflation, same thing with the economy, same thing with Israel and Hamas, same thing with Ukraine. Those are situations he doesn't want to talk about. But it's the same thing also, though, that Biden's getting cheap shots in about conviction, J6, and with those, I would say, if you watch closely enough last night, Trump deflected pretty interestingly, like from when he was asked about J6, he deflected to basically BLM riots across the country that burned cities, people were killed, but he didn't say BLM, though, if you watch closely enough, because he's courting the black vote across America, so he made a point to address it without really addressing it. So and I think he handled that fairly well, but he teetered, and when I watched that, I'm just like, oh, your campaign advisors are like, please don't say it.
Right. Totally. And I want to agree with Francis Scott, who said Trump displayed more self-control than before in previous debates. I mean, my mom, who's always my bellwether for kind of deep blue America, said, well, yes, Biden didn't do well, but we can't elect Trump. And I was like, Mom, at this point, like, say more. And then she wanted to get off the phone. And like, God bless her, she allows me to, quote her like this. But I guess my point is, that's what the left does, right? We can't have him. Well, at this point, why are we not even having a serious discussion about the relative merits of these two men? We just can't, right? So we're gonna talk tomorrow about something else. So I guess I guess what I want to say again, as a former campaign consultant, is that Trump has had good advice, and for a change, he's listening to it. It appears to me many times, like his pitfall in the past, and I've written an essay that I'm rather proud of, which I mentioned yesterday, about this after I saw President Trump speak in person, is that he squanders in the past. He makes an enemy of the media almost unnecessarily, and as a result, and I'm not saying they're fair to him, they're not, right, but as a result, he'll take situations in which he could have a straight 15-minute or 20-minute or hour-long communication to everyone in America, decided, undecided, left, right, center, and he spends like 80% of the time whining about his personal ego. I'm just going to say that, or how people aren't being fair to him, or they criticize him all the time, but they don't give him a fair shake. All of those are missed moments, and any good political consultant will be like, maybe all of that is true, but what matters is the life of the person listening to you. So talk about what's affecting them, what's affecting him or her. And he did a better job this time around. And he said things I haven't heard him say before. For instance, I told you yesterday that one of the main reasons I couldn't vote for Biden, I'm sorry, what a slip. I couldn't vote for Trump in the past, or any Republican, was the abortion issue. Just being honest. I know a lot of conservatives like me right now, but I just don't, I want to be transparent. I don't think abortion is great. I think it's always the worst decision in a bunch of bad decisions, or I'm sorry, the worst choice. It's always a bad choice, right? But I also know that, women and girls often feel they have no other choice.
Yeah.
So I thought he did a really good job with the abortion issue. And I said to you yesterday, we're going to see that the end of Roe v. Wade and the returning of the abortion question to the states is going to be a big boost for Republicans, because that was the elephant in the room, right? And so now the easiest thing for Democrats to say in the past is, you're going to take away a woman's right to an abortion. And they can't say that anymore. And Trump rightly said, and it's a blessing for every Republican candidate, right? Because the majority of the country is moderate on the abortion issue, right? We don't want abortion on demand. We don't want, late second trimester abortions, third trimester abortions. We're conflicted about it. But we also, most people don't want there to be no abortion at all. They believe that it's an issue between a family and a doctor, or a woman and a doctor. Point is, he was able to say it's gone back to the states, and it's the people of the states making that decision. And that's kind of an unanswerable argument. And you saw whoever was advising Biden in his earpiece back off from that. And that's a big, big win. And remember, yesterday we said independent women, or suburban women, or even liberal women, single women especially, are the bloc that need to go to Trump in order for Trump to win. The machines have to be done away with too, which is a whole other issue. Like, all of this is theater if we don't pass the bill that's up on Daily Clout to get rid of machines and have paper ballots. But nonetheless, that was big. And then there's one other thing he said. The environment is another reason I could never vote for Republicans, because in the past, respectfully, Republicans really just seem willing to destroy the environment for money. I mean, I'm just going to say it. Trump did a good job, and I've never heard him do this before, talking about clean air and clean water. He could have done better on specifics with a lot of his talking points, but he did better than he has in the past, resisting the temptation to say, people are so mean to me, you're not very attractive, whatever, and sticking to his talking points about his record. What do you think about all of that?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, look, I mean, the Paris Climate Agreement is a massive loser and I don't know why the Democratic Party gets behind it so heavily. Trump, when he did address that briefly with the climate issue, obviously, but the Paris Climate Agreement is a joke, and he brought up those concerns.
But liberals don't think it's a joke. We think that you guys are insane for destroying the planet without. No, serious. I'm serious.
Yeah, I agree. No, but that's an example of, like, he's looking at a specific policy issue that's a complete failure, and he's right, because he did elaborate on that, and he elaborated on it 4 years ago. He says, look, there's this international law basically that says, okay, we're going to hold countries accountable financially for not meeting certain milestones to help fight climate change. Okay, now, And all Trump's saying is, he's like, wait a minute. So why are we being fined trillions of dollars for not meeting milestones over the next 5 to 10 years? But yet you have absolutely no safeguards in place for China, for India, for Russia, who refuse to come to the table, who are the leading producers of pollution in the world, and they're never going to come to the table. They're not going to allow foreign nations to come in and inspect their climate situations. So my point being is, you're going to hold America accountable, but not the Philippines, not India, not China, not Russia, until they come to the meeting.
I mean, yes, but that has not broken through the liberal / legacy media. I never heard that argument.
Of course they wouldn't. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But also B, I mean, if the planet really is burning up, that's a kind of nitpicky argument, honestly, right? I mean, in other words, I think Trump or any conservative or any Republican or anyone is going to do better to say, these are the problems with the Paris Accord, and this is what I'm going to do about climate change.
Yeah, exactly.
Or make a definitive case that climate change isn't real or isn't a problem, which I have respectfully not heard made definitively. There are a lot of questions. I'm now open to believing that the models may be, wrong or unverifiable, but in the event that we shouldn't be putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, have a better plan. And it could be, and there's so many ways a good moderate or Republican environmental platform could be presented, like more bikes, more pedestrian access, more walkable cities, more playgrounds, like incentives to plant moss on your roof, incentives for gardens and planting trees. I mean, there's so many things that would be legitimately conservative to do, just in case we're destroying the planet. And I never hear that. And if I were advising Republicans, which I'm not, I would say you're really leaving a lot of money on the table, or a lot of goodwill on the table, by never talking about the environment. It may make your oil funders happy. It may make Detroit happy, but we all, left, right, and center are worried about the environment. So why not have a decent policy? So it was good to hear him say clean air, clean water, even without specifics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he did. He briefly addressed a specific policy issue internationally that has clearly not been working. But then he also did segue into what he would do. And another thing too. Trump, during his time in the White House, he did order the military to begin cleaning up Garbage Island, which never got any news coverage, not once. So he did actually have. My point being is, so he did address it, obviously. And there are a number of conservatives that have come up with accurate, real solutions for the issues of climate change. But again, my point being,
why don't we hear about
them? because the mainstream media is not going to cover it. I
don't mean to be rude, but can you name one? Like what? Like who?
Yeah, like Senator Rubio as an example. Senator Rubio came out years ago saying, I want to have an international conference with Russia, with India, with France, with Germany, and actually come up with a real, actual, articulate solution, because climate change is not an American issue. It's a global issue. And until the world powers come together, it's a moot point, So, and I think that's a highly intelligent statement that he made.
But at the same time, I do feel when I watch Republican candidates that they're really enthralled to oil interests, and they're just going to go to the death of everyone, with their oil buddies, and they won't say even things like, I did notice President Trump said yesterday, a range of energy options. He didn't say electric, he didn't say solar, but he did say a range. And I know from my life as a political consultant, that's actually he touched the third rail in that regard on the right by saying that. And so that's good. But respectfully, I'd like to hear a lot more from.
Oh, yeah, I agree. 2 weeks ago, there was a massive headline that never got covered of 1,200 scientists and professionals from across the world, led by a Norwegian physicist, Nobel Prize winning laureate, Ivar Givar. That's his name, Ivar Givar, who basically declared, along with 1,200 other scientists, that there is no climate emergency. But again, that doesn't fit their narrative, so they don't want to bring it up.
Right. But again, that's cool, but speaking again with my consultant hat, the candidate can't explain that in 2 or 3 sentences, he or she is not working.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the same thing with tax policy. Nobody wants to get into the thralls of tax policy. All they want to hear is lower taxes.
Right. I have to say also, as a lifelong Democrat, no longer, now I'm an independent, when Trump was talking, so the like red meat for Democrats is tax the rich, right? For some reason, we're just Pavlovian trainees to salivate at the thought of more taxation for the rich. I I think that's not working as well right
Yep.
now because we're all suffering. You know, even people who are very comfortable are seeing their assets kind of dwindle and are fearing economic collapse.
Mhm.
So it was persuasive to me when Trump was talking in that back and forth when President Biden was saying, and there are all these trillionaires, and I gather he means billionaires, you know, who are only taxed 8%. I'm like, how did they do that? But anyway, Trump came back with yes. And when I was president, we lowered taxes, lowered regulation, and had a booming economy.
Yep.
It was a pretty strong moment, I thought,
Yep.
pretty
Yeah.
unanswerable. What did you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Biden had to. It was one of his first senior moments when he said, America has 1,000 trillionaires. I'm like, and then he corrected himself at billionaires. I'm like, oh, that's got to hurt a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I noticed both of them really kind of regurgitated the same talking points from their parties from 4 years ago to a certain degree. Not always, but there was certain points. Biden, again, tax the rich, tax the rich. The economy is ruined not because of government expansion, but because of the millionaires and billionaires who are out of control. It's always their fault. It's never government's fault. So I thought
It's a weird argument to make when our debt is at this gigantic level, right? Like, say you tax all those billionaires, it's not going to make a dent and Ukraine barely came up in terms of the money that we're spending,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But it does make it's just very interesting to me as a lifelong Democrat hearing the time worn appeals of Democrats, tax the rich, kind of fall flat because that's going to be like a tiny drop in a gigantic ocean of money that has vanished into Ukraine, and into the national debt. I'm not kidding, and into the interest on the national debt. Well, let's go now to.
But I will say real quick though about Ukraine though. I agree with you. I do think they should have gone more into detail about that. That's a topic that I would argue both sides aren't really getting into. Senators and congressmen, DC is not really getting into it. The pundits are having a field day with it. But I wish both sides would have elaborated on more like why have we given Ukraine tens of billions. Where's it going to? I mean, Biden touched on that a little bit. About, well, we've given them the money to buy our weapons. I'm like,
right.
Okay, so we're giving them American taxpayer money to buy our weapons. That doesn't make sense to me, especially when Europe's economy is 10 times the size of Russia's economy. But yeah, I guess we can. I mean, those questions they just don't want to answer. It seems like and all Trump could say was, well, within a couple of days of being the president elect and winning this election, I'll have the deal brokered and it'll be an end to it. So there's little details.
Yeah,
But anyway.
there was interesting. I mean, I think probably both Democrats and Republicans are making bank on the corruption in Ukraine. I'm not kidding.
They are.
I mean,
They are. Yeah. The military
yeah,
industrial complex is alive and well, and President Eisenhower was right to make us fearful of that.
exactly. Well, there's some really interesting comments before I circle back to more things I want to know. No Diaz too says, why America can't industrialize anymore? Because under every Republican administration, they waste the nation's wealth on giving money to the ultra wealthy. It's a point of view. I want to be balanced. I think that's interesting. Honestly, I don't know what the policy is that I agree on about giving money to the ultra wealthy, except that taxation should be proportionate. And I've lived in multiple different tax brackets, including incredibly broke. And I know that it is deeply unfair that self-employed people, no matter what, can do better, keep more of their money than people who work for wages, in which, more and more and more is taken out, but taken out under both Republican and Democratic administrations, in my experience. Working people always get gouged on taxes.
Yeah, I mean that so the whole tax the rich narrative, it's in my opinion, it's not a winning strategy for Democrats anymore. It was 4 years ago, maybe during the Obama administration, sure. During the 2008 crash, the government bailing out these billionaires and these major auto industry companies. 100%. I understand the frustration then, but it kind of goes back to a show I used to love called West Wing, where Sam Seaborn is sitting there with his Democrat friends and the elites going over we got to tax the rich hard, we got to go after them hard. He's like, well, we already are, but he's like, first off, most Americans have no idea what the 1% even actually is. So when Bernie Sanders was up there being like, oh, the 1% to pay their fair share. Well, what is the 1%? And they never gave an answer until economists started coming out saying, well, 1% in America is anybody who makes over $400,000 a year or more.
Right.
And arguably they do pay their fair share because they pay 25 times more in individual income tax. So so that's already been proven time and time again, which is why when it comes to that kind of debate, it's similar to immigration. It's similar to the abortion issue. There's a lot of threads that can be pulled that a lot of people don't want to answer.
You're making me think of something which I've never examined, which is as a former Democrat, we all were conditioned to cheer for tax the rich,
Yep.
but to go no at the idea of keeping more of one's own money, as a working person. And why should that be? I mean, it's kind of the same thing, right? Or it's kind of a better deal to keep more of your own money as opposed to the government taxing the rich, and then God knows what the government does with the money. It rarely
Exactly.
profits of working people.
Yeah. And that's right. That's the whole thing too, Dr. Wolf, is the Democrats, they always want to blame the rich or the major corporations, and to a degree they're right. Major corporations have done certain horrible, horrendous things, but at the same time, though, they never say, is government too big?
Right.
Maybe we need less departments. Like
I never understood why Republicans wanted a smaller government until I began talking to Republicans. It seemed like a really psycho thing to want. What do you mean get rid of the Department of Education? But now I'm like, yeah, I could do without public health, except for, under very limited circumstances. I don't see what good the Department of Education is doing. I think we do need defense and infrastructure. But anyway, that's another conversation. Yeah. We do need to address why we're not talking about RFK Jr. And I confess I have not yet seen the RFK Jr. debate. I did interview his vice president, Nicole Shanahan. Everyone can see the interview. And I also confess that I can't, whenever I assess him, and I will watch the debate and I will bring my thoughts, maybe Chris will re-meet me after he watches the debate with RFK Jr. I do have to disclose that he's an acquaintance, a friendly acquaintance, and I like him as a person, and I like a lot of his policies. So I try so hard to be neutral that that I just wanted to disclose that. But we will watch the debate, right? And we will talk about it. I'll invite Chris to do so. Does anyone want to talk about what they saw in the RFK debate as we go on to Biden? Let's go back. Was there any particularly bad moment Trump had? We're both being a little bit erring on the side of being nice to Trump, and I want to highlight a bad moment if you want to mention one.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I brought up, previously, was that brief moment where he, was talking, he deflected away from J6 to. Right. With J6 and BLM, it was a lot of blame game. He's like, I called Chuck Schumer, I called Nancy Pelosi that day. I asked them if they want me to bring in 10,000 soldiers, and that's been substantiated, obviously, but it's never any, accountability, and I think that was kind of a little more of a cringy, like, you need to stop. So. Yeah.
Oh, Roscoe Aryeh says RFK slayed my president. Well, it's good to have another voice in there. And it's ridiculous that RFK Jr. was not on that stage. Yet another imaginary power that I guess CNN, the DNC, the RNC have arrogated to themselves, as we've said. I really wished in that J6 conversation, why is it so hard for Trump just to say, don't break the law?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, he said, I said peaceful and patriotic. I tried to get the National Guard, etc. Mm-hmm. But I don't I'm uncomfortable I've learned a lot about January 6th since I hung out, I've been hanging out with conservatives and independents, and I know how corrupt the media is about it. I know how questionable so many things are about it. I know that there's been hidden footage. At the same time, a lot of us, and I would maybe say a lot of us on the left, mm-hmm. or formerly on the left, we do fear you guys because we think you are crazy. In other words, we think you're like those blue painted naked, ancient Britons who show up on battle berserking, right? We think you won't have create a stable society. We think you're going to carry your weapons into schools and shoot everything. I'm not kidding, right? It's kind of good to have a specimen from the left, right? Because this is what we fear. And so it would have been very helpful for Trump in that moment to have said, look, everyone should obey the law. Everyone should protest peacefully. They should protest peacefully in Seattle. They should protest peacefully in Portland. They should protest peacefully in DC. I told them to be peaceful. Everyone should protest peacefully. That's all he needed to say. Just like the other moment, I think he didn't shine at all. They want to paint him as a dictator. No, seriously.
I know. It's funny.
Yesterday about how unhelpful it is that he made a joke. Oh, I'll be a dictator for a day. Great. That's forever enshrined in everyone's consciousness on the other side. And then that question, will you guarantee a peaceful transfer of power if you don't win? And he said, conditionally, if it's their election. That really does sound like a threat to those of us on the left side of the aisle. It does. It sounds like a threat of more instability. And people like my mom really believe that if President Trump is elected, that will be the last US election. That's been the Democrats' talking point. It's been repeated and repeated and repeated. And people who listen to NPR and read the New York Times really believe it. So what could he have said in that moment? Will you?
He should have said that, especially with J6, he should have said, look, I don't condone violence of any kind. The actions of a few on that day were completely egregious, but he also, if he wanted to, he also could have said, but look, the media completely blew it out of proportion. I'm not always the biggest fan of this individual, but, I think Ben Shapiro actually had a perfect statement about this a couple of months ago when he was at Oxford, University in England. He said publicly, he's like, look, at no point during that day was our nation at risk of falling, and secondly, senators and congressmen overwhelmingly don't work in the federal Capitol building. There's 4 buildings, all that. So
answers, respectfully, Chris, these are not good. These are horrible answers. That you can take over a federal building and put people at risk, and with all the security breaches, all the ushering in, all of it. Don't go into Nancy Pelosi's office and look through her stuff, right? Like, everyone knows that if they've been to kindergarten, right? And I mean, part of the reason I'm a stickler for this, though I know that a lot of my new friends on the right won't like it, is that I've been to countries where the rule of law has broken down. And it is terrifying for women and children, especially. It is terrifying when there are militias. It is terrifying when there's chaos and violence, and the people who suffer are women and children. And indeed, if you look back, right, who got beaten, who got killed that day? It was women, as I recall, right? I mean, those are the people who got trampled, and the woman who got shot. So, and if I were a female lawmaker and all these, armed men mostly were coming into the Capitol, I would be terrified. So I don't think it's a good answer. I think that we really do need to hear conservatives denouncing violent instability. We do, and calling for an independent investigation, because there were so many anomalies that day, right? But it can't be. What's bad about our country right now, Chris, is that things have gotten so tit for tat, right? Like, well, you guys, defaced and blew up and set fires in Portland, so it's kind of not that bad that, a bunch of us defaced and broke glass and stormed, the Capitol. That's not okay. We have to get back to one rule of law. Don't do illegal things, right? There's a reason we have a rule of law. Anyway, that's my response to that notion that that's a good answer. It's not a good answer. Many people were just peacefully protesting. Others weren't. And, we need to hear everyone say that violence in Portland, violence in the Capitol, it's all violence, and it needs to be treated in a nonpartisan way.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I'm not advocating for a right or wrong answer. I just, when it comes to that situation, I think, Trump could have answered it better during the debate, but there are still a lot of questions surrounding that day that people don't want to talk about.
No, I agree with that. I just don't know if the debate is the right place to equivocate. If you want to, like, he has a big job. He has his base, right? Trump has his base. He even has a lot of independents. He has, as we were saying, a lot of African Americans, a lot of people in the Latino community. But he needs, especially if there's going to be widespread cheating, which we know there is, he needs people who would never vote Republican in their lives and who think they would never, ever vote for Donald J. Trump, right? And so I'm telling you, and if any of his advisors are watching, nota bene, as they say, please note, you need to do better on the peaceful transfer of power and do better on don't set the Capitol on fire. You just do. Anyway, let's move on. Let's go back to and it's kind of satisfying. We've got over 7,000 people watching live, which is quite good. I don't get those numbers when I talk about herbal remedies. But let's go back for a moment if you have time. Can you stay with me for the whole hour?
Of course, yeah, of course.
Great. And we'll also take questions and comments. And this is interesting. Roscoe Aryeh, an old friend of mine, says, I thought there should have been a much stronger response to both BLM and January 6th. That's a great point, and I actually really agree with you. As a citizen, we're not supposed to have havoc. And I think we should notice that the defund the police movement, the most insane mission anyone's ever come up with, probably come up with and disseminated by our enemies, I would gather, happened at about the same time. Lots of great observations. Moral Nomad says Biden will step aside as a last gasp at a Democratic victory in a bittersweet tale spun by Hollywood. So this brings me back to what I was going to ask you about, Chris. And please call me Naomi. The unanimity of the talking point in legacy media today, he has to step aside. Advisors are in a panic. The DNC is in a panic. This repetition, you can tell a talking point because it's repeated verbatim. That means that it comes from the White House, right? He has to step aside. In the Atlantic, which is a deep state left-wing globalist platform, all these other mainstream media outlets, including CNN, right after the debate, right? Shocking, right? The fact that they're all saying the Democrats are in a panic, he has to step aside, that is not organic, everyone. That is a set of talking points that's been sent out by whoever is actually running the United States of America. So what we were talking about, my friends and I, including my husband, a wonderful analyst, who were watching this last night, is this was a sacrificial event in which Biden was sent out there in order to do really badly, visibly really badly, so that there could be a justification for him being forced to step aside. So what looks like it's happening, because we're not hearing him stepping aside today, right? We're hearing him say he's going to carry on. It sounds like there's a fight at the highest levels where they're trying to oust him. They're trying to get rid of him. Probably, my read is China wants him in. One foot in the grave. China wants him in. They own him. They want him to stay there. He's their Manchurian candidate. And other elements in the DNC want not to be beholden to China, want not to lose, which is the risk, right? China doesn't care if, ideally they want their candidate, but if he doesn't lose, if he doesn't win, if the RNC doesn't win, they'll just buy some other, elected official. But what I'm seeing is a real battle that is undisclosed, and that the DNC sent Biden out there to do badly, so everyone could see how badly he was doing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have agreed to a debate, right? Just he campaigned from his basement last time. So that's what I see, and what I see is that the faction that wants him out wants Gavin Newsom in, of course. And someone said on Twitter, and then I thought, oh my God, that's possible, to bring back Hillary. It's possible. It's possible. Or Mrs. Obama, right? President Obama's wife, Michelle. All of these, I feel, are, it's a very shallow bench, right? But they're kind of swirling around in the mists, waiting to be introduced. as the replacement candidate. And the person or people who aren't having it may include Jill Biden, and who knows what she's got on everyone, may include certainly a hostile power like China. So that's how I read yesterday. And I also want to say one other thing that I think is germane. Forgive me for, hogging the mic a bit. My husband, who, looks at China a lot and its history, talks about a century of humiliation, which is what China feels it went through in the 19th century. The Opium Wars, being humiliated by the West. And he always points out that nation has very long memory and thinks dynastically, not in 4-year spurts.
Yep.
So what he pointed out, and once you see it, you can't unsee it, is that we're seeing revenge for the century of humiliation. All of these symbolic moments that are so bad, the horrible way we left Afghanistan, the way Biden checks his watch during military funerals, the garbling language of Kamala Harris that you literally almost can't get that consistently unless it's intentional. All those men in dresses leading our military, right? And no disrespect to trans people, but the way, like the least attractive trans people, right? The face guards, the masks, in the with the leaders of the military. It's all a century of humiliation for us has begun. And, my friend last night who was watching with us said, "Where's the testicle chin?" like one of the iterations of Biden has these two weird blobs at the bottom of his face. And that wasn't really there last night. But over and over and over again, we see things that are humiliating, and humiliating to Biden, humiliating to the United States. And also a sensibility that is not Western about what humiliation is. A loss of face, loss of face, loss of face. It's a very other culture kind of humiliation. So I saw that. I can't unsee it. This could be part of the retribution, the century of humiliation. Get him out there, have him do badly. That's what's leading us. Everyone's laughing at us.
No, yeah, I completely concur with that. I mean, people don't realize, in my opinion, China is the greatest threat, internationally to America. They're challenging us constantly militaristically and economically. Obviously, there's been numerous reports of them buying farmland around our military bases, which has been proven in probably 20 plus states. They've been caught with having spies at our major universities. Let's not forget about Eric Swalwell and that situation. But at the same time, from a political operative perspective, I understand why China doesn't like us though too, because we have hemmed them in ever since the dictatorship of Mao. You think about it, China's hemmed in, and then around China, 80% of their population is right on the ocean anyway. But South Korea's right there, Japan's right there, Taiwan's right there, Australia's right there, Alaska, Hawaii. We have created this Pacific wall around them that has forced them to deviate to find alternatives for food supplies, alternatives for manufacturing needs. So it's very, very interesting that it hasn't escalated more than it already has, but it's something that's not going to go away. And I think that needs to be elaborated on by both major candidates. But you made an interesting point continuing off of that, though. Even Kamala Harris, what I found interesting about her, because I saw that the interview she did with CNN immediately after, and it was painful to watch.
What did she do?
Oh, she was very CNN was basically saying Biden did a terrible job, and she was trying to deflect and protect him. And CNN surprisingly kept pushing her, and she got a little defensive, a little snippy, and it was painful to watch. But what's interesting though, from a political perspective, is Kamala Harris being the first female in the White House, vice president. She's African American, Jamaican American. She has, Indian ancestors as well. She is, a perfect, a candidate with a diverse background heading into 2020. But what's funny though is when she entered the White House, I expected almost immediately that the media would prop her up. She'd be on The View constantly. She'd be on CNN constantly. She'd be taking tours through Hollywood, kind of like how they did with Michelle Obama. The media propped her up in a very articulate, very beautiful way, and she was almost kind of untouchable. But they didn't do that with Kamala, and they have never done that with her, and so that's kind of interesting. Now to your previous individual's comments about how they're just going to replace Biden with Gavin Newsom. I honestly, the logistics behind that, it's fun to talk about, right? It's clickbait, right? But the logistics behind that would be a nightmare. And if if they do a repeat of the 68 election and replace, their candidate with a different candidate,
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to go well. I mean, Republicans are hoping that happens because
Right.
you don't switch horses mid-race, especially that late, because the DNC convention is going to be in mid-August. I mean,
Right. Wow.
what's Newsom going to do? He's going to campaign really hard for a month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, and Biden's not going to step down. So
You made a really good point, and one that Ordinary Joe, a commentator here, also made. Shouldn't Kamala be the rightful choice? And indeed, she should. Imagine the optics of not even considering a Black woman and choosing a rich white guy like Newsom. And here I just have to say that's a great observation, and I should have mentioned it, of course,
yeah.
because theoretically she is the successor, and a Hillary or a Newsom would be her VP, or would the Speaker of the House be her VP? What's the line of succession there if Biden does by some chance step aside?
Yeah, so the natural order of things is president, vice president, and Speaker of the House. So yes, and then it goes back to actually to his cabinet. But yeah, so. Which, I mean, I just never, that's not going to happen. So
wow. So then we can't even speculate about a Newsom or a Mrs. Clinton unless they're going to throw out all our traditions and precedent and law and constitution, right?
Yeah, exactly. And if I'm Newsom's personal advisor, I wouldn't want that for Newsom, to throw him into a losing situation for 2 months of scrutiny and fundraising nightmares. I mean, Newsom wants a year and a half, 2 years to properly. I mean, look, I think the best situation for someone like Gavin Newsom, because you're right, he is the heir apparent. He's handsome, he's charismatic, he's tall, he's affluent. He looks like, I mean, a Kennedy to some degree, if I can say that. But the fact remains is he wants to get ramped up in 26. That's what he wants. And I think that's the best solution for him, other than being thrown in because the DNC wants him to in August. I push back on that. I mean, Biden's not going to go anywhere. He's waited for this opportunity for 40 years in the Senate. So.
Right. But I mean, respectfully, he doesn't look physically like he can manage through the election.
Oh, I agree with you. Yeah, 100%. I just think it goes back to a little bit of arrogance. I think Biden. I mean, there's reports that, Bill Clinton and Obama, a year and a half ago went to the White House within a week of each other. And there's speculation that that's about him stepping aside, just serving your one term. But again, I don't think Biden will ever step aside. He has to do it willfully.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, I'm thinking about what you said about them not propping up Kamala VP Harris, and they didn't. And it would be so easy to, like, any number of fake interviews in print media where she says brilliant things, that she may not say in person. They just aren't, which is weird. Like, why would you not? It's, again, like leaving money on the table. They're not, and they don't send her into high profile situations. They don't send her into situations that are look good for her. I mean, I know the role of vice president intimately from having advised a vice president, and she's, literally not at events every day where there's, even ribbon cuttings or, little league events. Like you just literally don't see her unless she's making some kind of horrible mistake. And that is weird, considering how much goodwill is kind of baked into the first woman vice president of color.
Yeah. I wasn't a big fan of Vice President Pence, but at the same time though, he was platformed more than she was. I mean, he was going
for sure
across the world. So
right. Well, this is definitely a mysterious time. Well, let me ask you this. I know I need to let you go. We're over an hour. It's been absolutely fascinating, but all right. Well, this blew my mind when it occurred to me, just brainstorming, but could the DNC be scheming to replace Biden with RFK Jr.? Is that even possible with an independent candidate? No. All right.
No. All right. They made their stance with him pretty clear when they ousted him from the primary. Because I mean,
this drumbeat of get rid of him. How do you read that? It's a mystery.
Well, yeah, I mean, a little bit it is. I mean, RFK Jr. is an interesting concept from the DNC's perspective. I mean, this is a man who is obviously very famous. His father was very famous. His uncle was very famous. The Kennedy dynasty has been, or at least used to be, a major powerhouse from 1940s till up until Uncle Ted passed away back in 2009, I believe. But individually though, RFK Jr., he's been very critical of the DNC for the better part of 20 years. And, and for a long time, he was an environmental lawyer. He also fought vaccines for a number of years. And you could argue if he's been vindicated from that or not been vindicated, I mean, that's up to your own personal conscience. But I don't think the DNC wants to prop him up, because out of all the Kennedy options they have, I don't think he's at the forefront of it. And I think he would force them to talk about topics that they do not want to talk about.
But there's also the principle at that level of politics of catch and kill, right? If you've got a very powerful adversary, it's good chess to absorb that adversary, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The New York Times.
He's not going away. He's now on the national stage. He's a young 68 or however old he is. He could be around the next cycle and the next, causing a lot of trouble to the DNC. Very interesting idea. Okay, so God forbid if Biden can't make it for whatever reason through November, or if these forces that are arrayed that are so interesting to watch are successful in hounding him out of the race, right? It would be Kamala Harris, and who would be her VP?
So that's a good question. I mean, you have to assess both major political parties over the next 10 to 15 years, and arguably, the RNC, they have plenty of candidates. I like to say they have plenty of horses in the stable to choose from.
DNC?
So about the DNC, though, that's a whole other option right there.
Oh, the RNC has candidates.
The RNC does, yes. I mean, they're locked and loaded for the next 15 years. But the DNC, if you watch them closely over the past 4 to 5 years, they played around with Elizabeth Warren a little bit, but she didn't resonate well with Middle America. Cory Booker, he was embarrassed when he was primarying in Iowa, and he went to a barbecue and he said he's a vegan. That doesn't really translate well. I mean, so I think the Democrats have had a hard time finding their next successor outside of Gavin Newsom. Now,
it's not impressive.
No, 100%. But the media can make him look pretty good, though. But I would argue, though, that there are some hidden gems within the Democrat Party. If they were smart, they would use people like Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio. He is the epitome of a moderate. Joe Manchin would have been an excellent choice. Before he became an independent. So they have had options, but I think the winds are blowing for Newsom Whitmer, maybe. But
you're right. Oh, what a creepy satanic duo that would be. All right.
Sorry.
Well, on that note,
I've ruined your day.
Right, we have to wrap up. I'm just gonna go I don't know, sprinkle the holy water around my house doors or something, because that's just such an evil thought. But you're right. And just before we go, we should mention what President Trump did with the mandates issue. So on our side of the world, people have been very upset. I haven't been upset because I've been a political consultant, but lots of people have been upset that he hasn't talked about how awful the vaccines have been and how damaging. And I try to explain to people, when you're president, you can't be an expert on everything. You have to take the advice of your special advisors, especially on medical and scientific issues that you are not an expert in. And the only way he can address that is to say, I was given bad advice, which makes someone look really weak and pathetic. So he hasn't been addressing it, but he did address it. And he said the mandates were bad. And I really thought he did a great job in hitting it. The second elephant in the room, right? A lot of elephants. And I thought that was very cool and a useful way to approach it. What was your thought about the lockdowns mandates issue when it came up?
Yeah, I've been asked that question numerous times. If the Democrats wanted to deliver a knockout punch to Trump, they could shift pretty heavily and blame him for the COVID mishandlings that were obviously.
They tried to. The bleach thing, they tried to.
Yeah. But even beyond that, though, I think they would dig themselves also an equal grave if they do that, because both parties have been so massively incompetent on that issue. But you're 100% right, though. I've tried explaining this to people countless times. Any president who's in that White House has about 5,000 things he has to do every single day. And then you throw on a pandemic like that, like COVID, it goes from 5,000 things to 20,000 things to do in a single day. Again, even that has a lot of speculation, because, even Dr. Deborah Birx, one of his former advisors, she wrote a book. It came out a year and a half ago talking about how her and Fauci lied to him a lot during that last year in office. And I don't know how she's not in prison for treason. But my point, but you're right though. I mean, there's like 50,000 advisors around him telling him to do everything's different, so
Yeah.
it's an impossible situation that he was forced into. So.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, I hope you all think this has been balanced enough on my part. It's not Chris's job to be balanced. And I will definitely reach out to the RFK Jr. campaign and see if they can send a spokesperson to talk to us. And I hope you'll come back and talk to us again. It's been absolutely fascinating. We have like over 7,600 people now. So obviously people, enjoy this dissection of the events, and what a hot, exciting, interesting time for political junkies, even though it's scary and alarming and disturbing. On that note, I realize I need to hop off, but everyone check out Chris Prosch at Felix Strategies if you have a podcast that's fantastic that you want to grow. How else can people find you and support you, Chris?
Oh yeah, I'm on Twitter at Prosch Christopher. So it's pretty easy to find me on Twitter. But felixstrategies.com is the easiest way to find me.
Fantastic. Loved it. And everyone, remember to support Daily Clout. If you want independent journalism, become a member, become a subscriber. Go to my Substack, Outspoken, become a subscriber. And we now have Geneva Bible readings on a whole separate Substack. Go there too if you're interested, and take care. We'll take back our country. Thank you, Chris Prosch. Take care.
Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Bye.